long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series. My name is Constant Reader Scott Daly, and this is my co-host and Kingslinger in training, Key Youth Matt.
Actually, it's pronounced Alan.
What?
Yeah.
Whatever. This week we are covering chapters 8 and 9 of Wizard and Glass, Part 3, Come Reap. In this week's reading, Susan ignores Roland's wish and breaks him out of prison, and then the final showdown between the gunslinger and the failure of a gunslinger goes down in the bad grass of Hambry. Our gunslingers win, but Susan is taken captive, and Roland looks at Merlin's grapefruit. Uh-oh.
Yep.
Matt, what'd you think of this week's reading?
Well, there's a lot of reaping, for one thing.
Oh, yeah.
Really very satisfying, reaping of what folks have sown throughout the previous chapters. Though I don't think we're done reaping yet. I think we're in for one more week of reaping after this.
Yeah, just a little bit more reaping. Just a little bit. Yeah.
By the end of this, though, I think we'll be done reaping.
By the end of this book, no more reaping?
I think after the come reap section. I mean, that's the reaping section.
Yes.
Just wanted to see how many times I could say reaping, honestly.
How do you think we're going to do any more sewing, though, after this?
Oh, shoot. I don't know, man. It's a hard one. Yes. I'm going to go with yes.
Before we get into this week's reading, I just wanted to talk about something real quick, Matt. I don't know what it was about this week in particular, but not only did we get the most answers to a discussion question we've gotten ever in the history of our show, we got a ton of you folks reaching out to us. Not only did you answer the discussion question, but you also said like super nice things about us. We got a bunch of emails. I don't know if like a bunch of people just so happened to all catch up at the same time this week or something, but I just like every day I check my email and there was another extremely nice email from you folks, and I just wanted to personally say thank you. I'm going to try to respond to each and every one of them, but as I've said on the show before, I am very, very bad at email, so if I haven't reached out to you personally yet, please know that we do appreciate it. It's just like I had a very long weekend, and it was very, very nice to see all these like constant messages of support. We really appreciate it.
Yes, he means as a long weekend, not the good kind, but
yes,
yeah, anyway.
Yes. All right, well, with that, let's move into the beginning of the end of our story. So we are covering Chapter 8 first. Chapter 8 called The Ashes, which is not at all a sign of things to come, right?
Uh-huh.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Especially since the chapter starts with panic. Panic as Susan flees Seafront. Matt, the chapter basically opens on this poor old Miguel character, a character we've only seen a couple times throughout the story, but he's never really been focused on. And he's in the grip of just utmost panic as his entire world collapses around him. The mayor is dead. The place that he called home is gone, and he just doesn't know what to do. And I love these opening lines. Susan observed with something like horror that Miguel, usually brushed and clean and neat as a pin, was wearing his serape inside out. There were tears on his cheeks, and he turned this way and that, following the passing riders, trying to hail those he recognized. She thought of a child she had once seen toddle out in front of an oncoming stage. The child had been pulled back in time by his father. Who would pull Miguel back?
Yeah, and of course, the immediate question that jumped to my mind was who will pull Susan back? Because,
yeah.
I mean, so first of all, I really love the description of chaos and panic here. It's I think one of my favorite aspects of writing in general is just when writers just nail an emotion to the page like this, and the chaos surrounding Susan in this moment is exactly that.
It's interesting because it's from her perspective. So like the book is talking about panic and fear. But like, there's moments where Susan thinks she has a handle on things, and then she's like, "I'm gonna help Miguel." I'm worried about Miguel, not myself. And then she, in the process of trying to help Miguel not step in front of a horse and get trampled, almost does the exact same thing herself. And her response to it is kind of just like laugh it off, like, "Oh my god, I almost just died." And
yeah.
like it's so clear that she's on the brink of just absolutely losing it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I thought that was that, and that's a perfect way of showing how in danger she is and how sort of unaware of that she is at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because sometimes when you're panicking, you don't really realize you're panicking. Like, I think part of panic is just like you stop thinking, right?
Yeah.
You stop thinking, you're just doing, and you don't even realize what's going on until moments later where you're like, oh no, what have I done?
Exactly. Yep.
I think the interesting thing here, though, is that while Susan is panicking, she gets a handle on her panic, and the book almost makes it seem like that was a bad thing that happened. Like if she had completely panicked, things would have, I think it says something like things would have turned out differently. And it's just like, oh, well, okay. So she gets a hold of herself and decides to do something, and doing something leads to everything that happens along these next few chapters.
Yeah, well, I think that there's a running thing, a running sort of concept of like, there's this idea of like a Greek tragedy where the character in the Greek tragedy, I'm thinking specifically of the Odyssey, actually, for some reason, or actually I think the reason we'll talk about later. Sure. But anyway, like the Odyssey, where everything bad that happens to Odysseus is really his fault in some way or another.
Yeah.
And usually because he sort of has the audacity to sort of spit in the face of the gods, or even just mildly disrespect them. He's always getting punished for things that he has done. And there's some element here where the story is making us aware that the cost that is going to come around to Susan is due to these various things that she has done. Some of them seem minor and not worth dying for. Some of them are much worse. We'll get to that. But yeah, I think it's interesting how much it reminded me of the Odyssey specifically as I was reading through this section.
Oh, that's really cool. I hope we get to talk about that more. I like that a lot. Yeah. So Susan, I think to demonstrate her panic, King does this. The only thing she was aware of was his name, Roland, 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 ringing in her head like a scream. Everything had gone upside down. The brave little quartet they had made that night at the graveyard was broken. 3 of its members jailed and with not long to live, if they even were still alive. The last member lost and confused, as crazy with terror as a bird in a barn. Which again, like kind of circles back around to our bird imagery, Matt, that King has laid on so thickly these last couple weeks.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's it's everywhere in this chapter too.
Yeah.
The bit where she moves to help Miguel and then is almost run over herself, I think parallels really well this idea that she's sticking out her neck to help the little coffin hunters, our boys, and yet she's going to be the one who bears the cost, right? Like she reaches out to help Miguel, she almost gets crushed. Miguel's fine. She's going to reach out to help the boys. They're going to be fine. She's the one who's going to bear the cost. Yeah.
That's you're absolutely right. That's perfect. That's a perfect match of imagery there. Oh, I like that. I never noticed that before, but absolutely. So we speaking of bird imagery, we've been talking about bird imagery a lot, and there's something about the name Rhea that we haven't really talked about very much, right?
Yeah. So did we talk previously on this show about how Rhea is a Greek goddess, or was that a different podcast about a different story that has a character named Rhea?
I'm going to be honest with you, man. I don't even know anymore.
Because there was one, and the character in that podcast was a bird. But anyway, Rhea is a Greek goddess, mother of the gods, according to Homer. She's like considered, somebody who even Zeus would kind of defer to, at least in some stories. Of course, Greek mythology varies a lot, so you'll get different versions of stories sometimes. But anyway, she's a big deal. It's hard to find the real connection between like why Rhea is a bird exactly. But anyway, there is an actual large flightless bird called a rhea, native to South America. They look kind of like a small ostrich. They're about 4 feet tall, so not tiny, not as big as an ostrich. I was surprised to find this existed, honestly.
Yeah.
You think you've heard of all of the big birds, and then suddenly you discover a big 4 foot tall bird called a rhea. So there you go.
Yeah. Really interesting. And it being a flightless bird, I think, is very interesting to me too, because Rhea in this book is such a character. She's she's this grimy, dirty, like earth-ridden character, like there's no soaring, there's no grace. It's just this and look, I'm not like throwing shade at these birds I've never heard of or anything, but just like you think of a flightless bird, and it's like birds generally walk kind of awkwardly. At least flying birds do, right? A flying bird, when they're walking around, kind of like they have to move their head in a specific way because it's kind of awkward. And I don't know, I think that's a perfect image of Rhea, this kind of decaying. I just imagine her like in the moment where she meets up with Cordelia later in this section. I just imagine her crawling and like, it's just disgusting, and none of the grace of a bird there.
Sure. Yeah. Like if you imagine all of these like evil forces converging on this part of the story as being signified by birds, like she is this kind of crappy kind of bird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which suits kind of how she is. I like that.
Speaking of Rhea, Susan heads back to her house and runs into her aunt, Cordelia Delgado. She's dressed all in black and looking exactly like Rhea, so much so, actually, that the first time Susan sees her, she's confused temporarily and thinks it's Rhea. We kind of already drew this connection that King was making last week, where he was kind of like making the image of these two look very similar. And I think the book is now just making that textual, kind of, to me, symbolizing that this transformation that Cordelia has been going throughout the story is now complete. To the point where her own niece doesn't recognize her as Cord right away. She sees the dirty, rotting witch Rhea first.
Yeah, I only just now made this connection, but it seems almost like Cordelia's kind of decay could be viewed as a kind of like, this is the sort of origin story of maybe how Rhea became the way she is. Like she just sort of became increasingly embittered and disappointed by the world. And, Rhea, it commonly kind of goes on these ragings against the sexism of her world. And I think that's maybe part of what we're seeing with Cordelia here, where she's also a victim of sexism as well, in the sense that like she doesn't have as many options as a man would have in her position. I think, like an older gentleman like Jonas becomes like powerful and resourceful and somebody who people defer to. An older woman like Cordelia or Rhea, for that matter, becomes something that is like cast out to the periphery of the town, if they haven't secured their position within a family unit. So
right, because that's the only option for women in this world is through marriage. And Cordelia very, very intentionally has never found love, has never found marriage. Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I think that is, you're absolutely right that's what we're seeing. And that makes the story of Rhea, who is a despicable character that I hate, kind of sad too, right? Like what happened in her life that led her down this path to where, even at the beginning of the story, that she's this woman living alone that hates the world, that is tired of men, that has kind of just, gathered up in herself to the point where the only thing that she like enjoys is seeing the misery of others.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it is a bit. I do think Rhea is one of the more like complicated villains in the Dark Tower so far, because she's totally awful, but there's more kind of empathizing humanity than there has been with a lot of these villains that we've encountered.
Yeah, I get that. I really love this small detail about the smudged, dirty gloves that she sees on Cordelia's hands, which confuse her at first, but then ends up being, it's because she was like in the stove, like collecting ashes for this exact moment to do this. And what she does here is fully unhinged, fully believing that Roland murdered the mayor and making the assumption that Susan was the one that put him up to it. She pelts Susan with ashes, cursing her. She says, "I curse thee with ashes," Cordelia cried, flinging a black and gritty cloud of them at Susan's leg and the hand which held Pylon's reins. "I curse thee, darkness, both of thee. Be ye happy together, ye faithless, ye murderers, ye cozeners, ye liars, ye fornicators, ye lost and renounced." Oh boy.
Yeah, there's more of that good needful things energy after Cordy here continues her spectacular implosion, now literally looking like an evil witch and throwing ashes like a crazy person. Just
and I think one day you will just call that Stephen King energy when he has his characters go full tilt in this kind of way. I think he's very, very good at gathering that energy behind the dialogue.
Sure.
We don't talk about King's dialogue very much, but I think he's actually very, very good at it. These lines, there's a lot of very good dialogue, some badass dialogue, some terrifying dialogue in just these two chapters alone.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point, because there's I think we do usually give the badass lines their due, but maybe we do overlook kind of the more quiet and just structural bits of dialogue where
Sure.
he is embedding a lot of characterization and power into those moments. And yeah, this is certainly one of those where there's this repetition. It all really sounds good read aloud, which is something that really pops when the audiobook reader is reading it.
Yeah, we've got some emails telling me that I really, really need to listen to the audiobooks, and I definitely have. I don't listen to all. Matt is full audiobook. My thing is I usually read these chapters twice through. Like I'll read them once and then I'll read them again, highlighting in my book, which is something I never tell people to do, but I bought this set specifically to highlight in. So I've decided I'm okay with it. This is I'm allowed to write in my book set. And then sometimes if I have time after that, I'll just like grab little snippets of it that I want to listen to again via audiobook. So I have heard it and I love it. The audiobook is very, very good. I totally agree with that. But yeah, the dialogue here, it's fun to read. Like I end up putting more quotes in my, in the script, Matt, because I just love reading some of this out loud. It's really fun.
Yeah. I mean, I get it entirely. Yeah.
So she's cursed with ashes here, Matt, which of course means something special to us because we know how Susan's story ends, right? But I think it's interesting to kind of look back at the title of this chapter, which is The Ashes. And basically the entirety of this chapter is Susan's point of view, with the exception of a couple switches where we move over to other people very briefly. And under that chapter title, the subtext of what's happening here is becoming clear. Textually, this is the chapter where Susan chooses to save Roland, Cuthbert, and Elaine from certain death, but by naming it The Ashes, after this scene, this cursed scene, I think the subtext is really clear. This is the chapter in which Susan lays her bed in the ashes, as Cordelia says. This is when she makes the choices that make her bed, and that she will lay in it, and she will lay in those ashes. Every moment in this chapter sets up the choices that she's making that will lead to her death. Not to say she is totally to blame. There's definitely some Roland going on here, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is that tragic framing I was talking about, in the sense that like the coming disaster could have been averted at multiple points, if only this, if only that. You know, the book keeps telling us if she had done this thing, if she hadn't done that thing, then maybe things could have turned out differently. But the characters inexorably play out the choices that we know are going to doom them, and we have to watch them do that. And that's again, repeating myself, but that's the part about it that reminds me of the kind of the Greek tragic mode. Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely correct. Like this is what King is operating in. This whole story, this whole time has been a Greek tragedy. Mm-hmm. This is the fall of our characters here, and so their choices leading to that fall becomes very important. And I just love the way when you frame the chapter around this recurring beat of the ashes, not just ashes, right? Like you could name the chapter Ashes, but you didn't. You named the chapter The Ashes. And so like, I don't know. It's just very, very impactful for me when I really sat here and thought about that name, why it seems so ominous. It's like, it's the ashes. These are the ashes. This is what brings it. Yeah. I love that. Mm-hmm. So one more thing that Susan reveals here in her angry spat with her aunt is that she's pregnant with Roland's child. Oh, man. Come on, King, you asshole. Fucking asshole, King. See, he got me. I thought he had told me the bad stuff that was going to happen in this tale. I thought I was prepared, like I was resigned to Susan's death. I had accepted it. I'm sure that the scene itself will be terrible when it comes, but I've known the whole time she was going to die, so I was ready for that. But now he throws this curveball. So like it's worse than we were told. Yeah. And it's sadder. Ah, God. Yeah. It's totally sadder because this is the moment in which Cordelia is cursing her, which we know, like, I'm not saying the curse causes her death, but like if you layer a curse onto a character who you already know is going to die, it makes that curse matter more. And like Susan is triumphantly resisting her aunt. It's this moment of empowerment where she's like telling her aunt to fuck off. She like actually takes some of the ashes and throws them back at her, and which becomes a really powerful image later in the story, like Cordelia with the ashes on her face. Yet we know that this triumph is kind of for naught, right? We know that, like, yes, you are resisting your aunt. Yes, you are. I forgive you for what you did to my father. This triumphant moment of strength and power that she summoned here to say, like, I'm going to marry him. We'll be married before the year is out, and I am carrying his child, and we'll be a family. And it's just really turning that knife. It really is. Yeah. Her little fantasy here, it kind of mirrors Roland's little fantasy later, where they both, very youthfully imagine how everything's going to be wonderful very soon, and everything's going to fall into place, and it makes it even sadder, of course. Yeah. One thing that I do wonder is whether Roland is actually going to find out about the baby before Susan dies. In other words, is Roland only like just now learning this as he kind of psychically channels the story? And we'll find out obviously pretty soon. I'm just very interested to see either way.
Yeah, that'd be a pretty big blow 30 years later to be like, oh, she was pregnant with my kid also.
Yeah, right.
Neat.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Thanks, psychic storytelling power.
Yeah.
Really helping me process through this stuff.
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah. Susan heads out to the hut in the bad grass to get the guns that Roland buried there. She, of course, is not going to immediately head west with them like Roland told her to, but is instead going to save her lover. And I love this quote here. With faint but genuine curiosity, Susan wondered if Roland had really expected she would ride blithely off to Gilead with his unborn child in her belly while he and his friends were roasted, screaming and red-handed on the Reap Night bonfire. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think Roland really thought she would ever do this?
I'm not sure, but I think, later he takes this approach of, Susan, you disobeyed me. And Susan is kind of rightly like, kindly fuck off, good sir. Yeah. And I think that makes me think that he did really expect her to obey him on this. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think he did. I mean, that's the very noble, it seems like the very noble gunslinger-esque thing is I'm going off. You must do this for me. You must. And I expect you to. And of course she doesn't. And she saves him. And like you said, just like when she steps in the road to try to save Miguel, damning herself.
Yeah. There's a lot of everybody overlooking Susan in this section and in this book. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But basically the reason Susan is able to play the role that she plays in the story is because people keep overlooking her existence.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. She's like both her and Shimi, I think, are just incredibly underestimated by everyone in town.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
So we then cut over to Fran Lengel, horsemaster and all-around asshole, who is calling the town for an announcement about the deaths of Hartthorn and Kimber-Rimber and Roland and his friends' involvement in it. And I think this is one of my favorite passages in the reading so far. It's just so good. He's kind of relaying this out and thinking about what Eldred Jonas had told him when he was preparing him for the speech. The bonfire will burn and the stuffy guys will burn it, Eldred Jonas had told Lengel. That's all you're to say. It's all you need to say. And he'd been right. Lengel saw it. It was on every face, not just the determination to do right, but a kind of dirty eagerness. There were old ways, old rites of which the red-handed stuffy guys were one surviving remnant. There were los ceremoniosos. My Spanish is not good. Ceremoniosos. Charyu tree. It had been generations since they had been practiced, except every once and again in secret places out in the hills. But sometimes when the world moved on, it came back to where it had been. I love this so much. Like this whole idea, the clever way in which Lengel and therefore Jonas manipulates the crowd into doing exactly what they want the crowd to do. Not by telling them to do it, by just trusting in humanity to jump to the logical leaps that they want them to. Yeah.
I mean, the whole paragraph is just this incredible indictment of humanity.
Right.
This feels like one of those places where King is actually articulating his feelings about the nature of people and the nature of evil. Basically just make people feel like they're on the right side and they'll burn people alive.
Yeah.
Not just willingly, but eagerly, like it's a party. And the world, and even though the world's moving on, the world doesn't move on from this. This is going to stay. This is this is the stain. This is the badness. This is the evil.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of those things where I'm like, this just absolutely radiates like Stephen King's impression of what evil seems to be throughout the story.
Yeah. And maybe we will be talking about that a little more later.
Yes.
But I just like, before we move on, that last line, right? But sometimes when the world moved on, it came back to where it had been. It's basically saying as society collapses, it returns to its barbarism almost. But it's just a beautiful way of saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Definitely.
I love it. I love it so much. And then there's this one thing, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole when thinking about this. As the speech ends, Lengel says, "Gods give you peace," he said now, stepping back and folding his arms with his hand on his shoulders to show he had finished. "Gods give us all peace. Long days and peaceful nights," they returned in a low automatic chorus. I just think that's really interesting because, like, we've seen long days and pleasant nights over and over again. We've never seen this kind of turn on the phrase long days and peaceful nights. And I think that makes it stand out to you a little bit more. And therefore, like, really, really grasps the irony of the situation, right? That these people who, as King has just demonstrated, are being manipulated very easily into deciding on their own to burn 3 men alive for what they think they've done, to eagerly do it, are wishing long days and peaceful nights. Peace there.
Yeah, right. Because peace can have a kind of a dark connotation when it's like the peace of the grave, right? And it's interesting how it's a kind of, I forget there's like a word for this, but it's like a call and response type thing where long days and pleasant nights is kind of an obvious like greeting call and response, but this is a different thing. I don't know what we don't know what it is exactly. It almost feels religious in this context, like especially with him folding his arms like this. Like it feels like he just gave a sermon and then he does, not the sign of the cross, but this little hand sign, and then they all give their little response, and it feels very ceremonial in that way.
Yeah. And I love the low automatic chorus. I think you're absolutely right. As a person who attended Catholic Mass all throughout my childhood, like just when you really get to like the Apostles' Creed, right? It's just like you're not even thinking about the words anymore. You're just reciting them. I mean, like you're just reciting the words. You're not like they have no individual meaning for them.
Or you're reciting approximately what you think the words are, having never actually memorized it.
And mumbling your way through it. Yes. Right. Like all good Catholics. Yeah. Absolutely. I think you're right on there. That the religious nature of it.
Cool.
So Susan heads back to the Barkay Ranch to collect fireworks for her daring prison rescue and gets covered with even more ashes as she does so. I love this quote. Once she raised her hands in front of her eyes, examining the barrel soot on her fingers. She thought of going to the pump in the front of the cookhouse and washing, but decided not to. Let it stay. They were Katet, one from many, strong in purpose and strong in love. Let the ashes stay and do their worst. To which the ashes reply, okay.
Yeah. So this is, classic boldly daring Ka defying the gods. This is, Odysseus bragging after he blinded the Cyclops Polyphemus. hey, if anybody asks, tell him it was Odysseus that did this to you. And then, of course, Polyphemus's dad, Poseidon, the guy who really loves horses, connections, does his worst and completely, derails Odysseus's journey. So that's just like saying do your worst to fate. Just not a good move.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I want to focus on here is that Susan's strength in her overconfidence here comes from her feeling of Katet, right? Yeah. They were Katet, one from many, strong in purpose and strong in love. So she looks at the situation and she says, as long as we are together, nothing can stop us. Nothing can beat us. We are one from many. We are strong. We are joined together. And I think that's important because, like, as we'll see later in the chapter, they are separated. Like, Roland leaves her behind. And like her confidence in this comes from her belief in Roland and belief in her and Roland's love together. Right.
Yeah. Which, I mean, Roland already sort of made this mistake and rectified it. It's interesting to see her sort of making a similar mistake, right? Like, thinking she's invulnerable because her love is so strong.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, it's wonderful because, like, again, we've talked about this so many times throughout the story, but the fact that we know the end point allows King to do these things in a way that he can call attention to them, in a way that they have more meaning than they would have if the death at the end of it is kind of a shocking twist. And I just think it's like him having fun with that concept. I mean, that is like him taking the Greek tragedy and saying, okay, how can I have fun with this thing?
Yeah.
In really cruel ways because I'm Stephen King.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's interesting because it's like the Greek tragedy thing is really popping out to me now that it's really fully connected for me, and it makes me wonder, like, is this a thing that he does in a lot of books where he kind of almost rubs it in your face how doomed the character is, or is it more of a, like, every once in a while he'll throw in a sentence like, and that was the last time you saw him? Yeah,
I mean, it's more the latter.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever been like across a, like, I don't want to say that because I'm not 100% sure. I don't have perfect recall, but I don't think it's ever been as far across a book as this one. Like, we've known this from the very first word on the very first page, exactly what was going to happen to Susan. So I don't think it's been like that. But yeah, I mean, he, as we've talked about many times, he really does like to kind of show his hand before he shows you exactly how he's going to arrange that hand and win.
Yep. Like a good magician.
Yep. So we then cut back to Hambry as Susan marches back into town and bumps into none other but Shimi, who was waiting for her here. He knew he'd need to be here. He knew his mule would need to be saddled. He knew it all. And that's Katet, right? I think one fascinating thing here is Roland has not mentioned in this story at all how they communicate telepathically. But we know that Katets communicate telepathically, right? Like, that is something that is established by the story. We have not seen it in this world. Roland's link with his Katet in the present is weaker because they come from another world. That's what he said. But these people come from his world. So assumingly, their telepathic link here should be stronger. I mean, and it's possible that young Roland wasn't even aware of this fact, of this truth yet. But perhaps it's happening.
Yeah, I guess I literally completely forgot about that. I mean, honestly, when I got to this point, I just kind of figured that Shimi had some shining of his own, but Katet telepathy is a more straightforward idea. You know, it's also like this is something that occurred to me, and I don't know if I think this is actually what's happening, but like, I feel like if there were such a concept as Katet in our world, then wouldn't like every group of high school friends be like, yeah, man, we're a Katet? And it's like, no, you're not. Katets are like special for like special fateful things. And just because you say you're a Katet doesn't mean you're a Katet. But everybody wants to believe they are. So
what you're kind of arguing here is that Roland, a 14-year-old boy, looks at his group and says, we are Katet, and declares it so. But he doesn't actually know that. He doesn't know that's true.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's entirely possible that I'm right, but I'm not saying that I think I'm right. I'm just putting that out there as an idea.
Sure. Cool.
Because I totally would have always called whatever group I was in a Katet as a 14-year-old, and probably every other age too, because it's a cool concept.
Yeah. Especially if you get psychic powers.
Exactly.
So this week on Shimi is the fucking best, and now maybe you understand why everyone said he was their favorite Hambry character. I love this whole scene. Shimi, if you help me, you're done in Hambry, done in Magus, done in the Outer Arc. You go with us if we get away. You have to understand that, do you? She saw he did. His face fairly shone with the idea. Aye, Susan, go with you and Will Dearborn and Richard Stotwork and my best friend Arthur Heath. Go to Inworld. We'll see buildings and statues of women in gowns like fairy princesses, and if we're caught, we'll be killed. He stopped smiling, but his eyes didn't waver. Aye, killed will be if taken, most like. Will you still help me? Cappy's all saddled, he repeated. Susan reckoned that was answer enough. She took hold of the hand, pressing the sombrero to Shimi's chest. The hat's crown was pretty well crushed, and not for the first time. She bent, holding Shimi's fingers with one hand and the horn of her saddle with the other, and kissed his cheek. He smiled up at her. We'll do our best, won't we? She asked him. Aye, Susan, daughter of Pat. We'll do our best for our friends. Our very best. It's just a really heartwarming moment where this kid is just wonderful. And he's just like, without any hesitance, without any fear, he's just like, yeah, of course. I understand. I understand the stakes. I understand what's happening here. And yeah, I'm going to do it because I'm supposed to, because I'm meant to. And so that's what I'm going to do.
You know, it's really interesting because King has I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure Alan and Cuthbert are going to survive. I'm pretty sure Susan's going to die. No idea what's going to happen to Shimi. No idea. Mm-hmm. And I care about Shimi. I don't want anything bad happen to Shimi. I love Shimi. So despite all of the doom and all of the omens and all of the foreshadowing, there is this one character in this story where I'm just super invested and really don't want anything bad to happen to him. So that this element is in the story. I'm just noticing this right now for the first time. That it's not like we know how everything ends.
True, definitely true. And I think that's a masterful manipulation of tension, right? When you can obviously you can lay down your path towards the ending, but there are a bunch of branches on that path, and you don't know where those ones are going to go.
Yeah.
So then King goes full fucking Western here, Matt, as a lone vaquero leads a mule into town wearing a heavy serape and a sombrero pulled down over their eyes. They walk into the sheriff's office where Deputy Dave is driving the prisoners crazy with his bad guitar playing, until the door swings open at least, because then the vaquero walks in, holds a gun up to Avery as firecrackers go on around them. Matt, this is so wonderful. The tension in the scene is so freaking good. Susan, dressed as a cowboy, dressed as a man, walks through this door and just fucking holds a weapon to these people.
Yeah, it's such a crazy plan, isn't it? It's a really bad plan. It only really works in the sense that okay, yeah, she gets the boys out of jail, but she has to kill a few people and is basically traumatized now. It's all and really I don't know, man. It's it almost shouldn't have worked, you know?
Yeah. And the one little brilliant bit of insight in this plan is to have Shimi shooting firecrackers in the background. Yeah. So at least maybe people won't hear the gunshots.
True.
But I mean, that is relying on a very dangerous low success rate plan. I think what we're seeing is what we kind of see in both these chapters is that these law people and these people that are holding guns, they just don't know how to actually do anything. And they're just so totally unprepared for people actually bringing violence to them. They just don't actually know what to do with that at all.
Yeah, it's true. It seems like they, other than maybe barroom brawl type stuff, they're not ready for this war that's come to their doorstep.
Yeah. And we see that Deputy Dave here, the one character who I think we kind of showed had a little tinge of regret and doubt about what was going on in this town, tries to be a hero. And I love King's writing here. At the end of his life, it was duty and not fear of the big coffin hunters which propelled David Hollis, who had hoped to be sheriff of Magus himself when Avery retired. And, he sometimes told his wife Judy, a better one than Fatso had ever dreamed of being. He forgot that he had serious questions about the way the boys had been taken, as well as what they might or might not have done. All he thought of then was that they were prisoners of the barony, and such they would not be taken if he could help it. And so he charges, and Susan shoots him twice in the chest, killing him.
Yep.
And then after almost setting herself on fire by firing the gun one more time, she puts the gun up to Avery's neck and pulls the trigger, blowing his brains out.
Jesus.
With as we've been told before, Roland's guns are big caliber weapons, right? These are not small bullets.
Yeah.
This is you can imagine, I think the line is really wonderful that King puts here because it's just so simplistic and yet captures everything. The mess was considerable.
Yes,
perfect.
absolutely.
It's perfect.
It's kind of a horrible way the story has had to go, right? We knew things were going to get bad, but it's ugly. It's sad.
Yeah, I mean, and it would be one thing if the people waiting in here were, Reynolds or DePape or Jonas. These characters have been in on what's going on here, and that makes them not great people. But they also have been constantly portrayed as kind of the bumbling local sheriffs that are in over their head, right? That are just people, they as we just said, they were not ready for the stakes of this war and the stakes of the world as this plan is going to whip up around them. Yeah. And so, I mean, we have Deputy Dave here who is just doing his job, who says these are my prisoners. I'm responsible for them. I will not let anyone take them. That's my job, and I'm going to do it. And for that, you die. It's sad. It's really sad. I mean, I'm glad Roland and his friends aren't dead. I like them much better, but it is really sad. And I think King wants you to feel that way, right? I think through Susan's reaction to this thing, King wants you to feel a little bit like, Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I think like in this moment, Susan has basically like lost innocence in an important way.
Yeah.
Because I mean, so I think there's definitely themes of justice in this story, particularly this part of the Dark Tower. And up until this point, I think Susan was situated on the side of justice. She was a victim of an unjust world. But now she's killed this guy who the book fairly consistently portrayed as being a decent dude, a dude probably on the side of justice, and it was unjust that she kill him here. It wasn't right. It wasn't justified, and she knows it. And now, as we head on to the next movement of the story, it's like she has done this crime, this terrible sin, which I don't know. In some sense, perhaps she'll be punished for.
Yeah, and I want to finish this chapter on this beautiful bit of writing here. It's Susan kind of dealing with everything you just talked about. Whether or no what she had done was murder, she had ended 2 lives this evening and crossed a line that could never be recrossed in the other direction. She had done it for Roland, for her love, and simply knowing she could have done no different now offered some consolidation. Be happy together, ye faithless, ye cozeners, ye murderers, I curse thee with the ashes. Susan seized Roland's hand, and when he squeezed, she squeezed back. And as she looked up at the demon moon, its wicked face now draining from choleric red-orange to silver, she thought that when she had pulled the trigger on poor earnest Dave Hollis, she had paid for her love with the dearest currency of all, had paid with her soul. If he left her now, her aunt's curse would be fulfilled, for only ashes would remain. If he left her now, her aunt's curse would be fulfilled, for only ashes would remain. And oh man, and only ashes will remain.
Yeah, definitely. This is one of those tragic moments, right? Yet another one. We're kind of ticking them off almost as we approach the finish line. It's like, okay, well, I mean, this is almost worse than a blinding of Polyphemus moment. This is destroying something very precious by taking a life. You have offended fate, offended the gods, perhaps. And the gods are going to get back at you for that.
And once again, like that last time, it was all for Roland, right? Why did she have the confidence to say, do your worst, ashes? Roland. Why did she pull the trigger and kill this man? Roland. It's all for him. It's all for this man. And we'll see how this all plays out.
Yep.
All right, we move on into the next chapter and our final chapter of the week, which is a very, very long one. This was most of this week's reading, and that's because there's a whole lot happening in Chapter 9, Matt. We call Chapter 9 Reaping, in which everything will be reaped. And it's probably our most action-filled chapter of the book so far, at least probably since the final showdown with Blaine at the very beginning of the book, right?
Yeah.
But first, our quartet reunites in full strength as they meet up with Shimi in the stables. I love this moment where Shimi gives Cuthbert just like a great old big hug as they decide what to do next. Like, I think there's a moment where Roland like get prepared to be hugged. Like Shimi's walking up and Roland's like, okay, come on. And he just like zooms by Roland right to Cuthbert. It's really good.
It is pretty good. It plays as funny to me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. So they decide what they're going to do next, Matt. They're heading to Sitgo, and Roland says, we've got a job to do, and we're going to let them know we're doing it. Eldred Jonas most of all. He offered a thin blade of a smile. I want him to know the game is over. No more castles. The real gunslingers are here. Let's see if he can deal with him. This is such a tone-setting statement for the chapter, right? This is the first little bit of the chapter. This is what ends the first little bit of a chapter. And there's a little bit of overconfidence from him here, right? Like, no more games, no more castles. The real gunslingers are here. Let's do it.
Yep. I mean, despite the fact that we know that everything is going to go sideways for our heroes eventually, we do get to fully enjoy this section where they just kind of absolutely wreck the opposition. They do get to be as cool as we imagine them to be. I mean, there's still a big strategic error that they've made, but in these moments, it comes off pretty awesome. Yeah,
I mean, it is interesting the ways in which, yes, this is, as you said, this is the reaping. We have characters reaping what they sow, and Jonas is reaping the consequences of kind of the way he treated Roland throughout the story, the kid gloves he kind of treated him with. And so, yeah, I agree. Like, you got to give your readers some satisfying moments sometime, especially in a story that ends in a tragedy like this. Like, let's give them some wins. And Roland gets a pretty fucking big win here.
Yeah, for sure.
So the Katet heads out to the Sitgo and basically blows the entire thing to hell, lighting up each and every one of the 19 active oil derricks in one decisive stroke. I couldn't help but think about that moment in our recent history in 1991 when the Iraqi army set fire to all the Kuwaiti oil reserves. That's such an indelible image. Like, I was only 6 when it happens, but I just remember like the news just being of just oil burning. Like oil burning and soot in the sky.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be an image that worked its way into King's brain and out onto the page here. Because, like, what a hellish, apocalyptic, biblical image that is. It's so appropriate for this book about, like, this world on its way out. And, you know, God, you can imagine this being on the TV in the background as King is writing, like, about his end of the world.
Yeah.
And, you know, you kind of have to imagine, like, the rest of this chapter with this literal black cloud hanging over everything of this, you know, like you said, the huge amount of soot that's going to be kicked up.
Yeah, I love that. Meanwhile, though, Jonas is off banging Coral again. And again, Matt, King takes the time here to represent their lovemaking as something unique and different for both of these characters. Lovemaking, yar. Lovemaking, horse shit. He and Coral made love no more than donkeys did sums. But it was something. Oh, yes, indeed it was. He'd been with passionate before, ones who took you into a kind of oven place and then held you there, staring with greedy intensity as they pumped their hips. But until Coral, he'd never been with a woman that sparked such a powerful harmonic chord in himself. With sex, he had always been the kind of man who took it when it came and forgot it when it didn't. But with Coral, he only wanted to take it, and take it some more. When they were together, they made love like cats or ferrets, twisting and hissing and clawing. They bit at each other and cursed at each other, and so far none of it was even close to enough. When he was with her, Jonas sometimes felt as if you were being fried in sweet oil.
Oh man. Well, that certainly has some notes in common with the description of somebody's relationship with their drug, right?
Yeah.
Last week we talked about how surprising it was that this relationship was being portrayed like almost positively. This description is a little bit more negative and creepy. Frankly, I still think it's fascinating how Coronis, which is what I'm going to call this pair.
Too soon.
Well, okay.
Corona, the virus that's everywhere.
Oh yeah. I forgot about that. I forgot about the virus that's everywhere. And you know, Roland and Susan are being contrasted in a way that manages the highlight flaws about both of them.
Yeah.
Like this is the pink love, I guess. Theirs is the red love, I guess. Maybe, but we're not actually sure about that. In both cases, though, it's not. It's never portrayed as entirely clean and positive.
No, I mean, like this is powerful. It's crazy. It is like. The fact that he takes the pain, like, why is this here, right? Like, this doesn't need to be here. All you need to say was he's banging Coral, and then he hears the explosions, and he thinks that was just our love making again. But he goes into this like, this is unique in his life. This is something he's never experienced before, an intensity he's never experienced before. And I do think it's interesting when we kind of bring it in with what happens in this chapter, where the book really starts to focus on the fact that Jonas has kind of been taken by Marilyn's grapefruit, right? Like he has kind of been suckered into its thrall a little bit here. And, you know, from the very, very beginning, the first time we saw this thing, we've connected these powerful sexual urges to this thing. And so here in this relationship, he's feeling this powerful urge that he's never felt before, this insatiable need that he's never, ever felt before.
Yeah. I love it.
So Jonas and his lovemaking are interrupted by the explosions at the Sitgo, and he realizes almost right away who it must be. Will Dearborn, he who exposed him. This is absolutely one of my favorite parts of the story. You talked about it last week, and you were so right. Jonas won the day, right? He captured Will, and he won. But the words Roland left in his brain are just slowly eating away at him, to the point where the gunslinger will win the war even though Jonas won the battle.
Yeah.
Because we see in this moment, this is we're playing in his head. You're in the West, Dearborn had said. The soul of a man such as you can never leave the West. Of course it was true, and he hadn't needed any such tit monkey as Will Dearborn to tell him. But now that it had been said, there was a part of his mind that couldn't stop thinking about it. It's so good.
Yeah. I know we're like you said, we're building toward this imminent moment of his death, basically, and it's just it's interesting because Roland, not Roland, Jonas has become such a complicated part of the story. Mm-hmm. Like at first, I was just like, oh, it's going to be great that Roland is going to be fighting basically a team of older and more experienced gunslinger types, because that is, or gunslinger trained dude, because that's just like the perfect way to take your story to say like, okay, well, you think gunslingers are formidable. Well, now the enemy is a gunslinger. But now it's like I think we're being invited to draw parallels between Jonas and Roland, because Roland is also a kind of exile. Mm-hmm. In the present day, at least.
Sure. Yeah.
Not that he was sent west, but he is in exile from Gilead. I mean, Gilead is fallen, right? In a certain sense, you could say Roland is in the West now. I doubt he thinks of himself that way, but I also don't think he thinks that he's this great, perfect hero anymore. I don't know. It's just interesting how it's only been really in the last, in this last bit really before Jonas dies that I start realizing that this character has some parallels to our older Roland.
Yeah, well, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, at the beginning of The Gunslinger, he is traveling westward, right? Mm. Like that's he's chasing the Man in Black out to the west, I think so.
So I mean, who knows really?
Yeah, the directions in this freaking thing. I love that Jonas admits the truth of it here, right?
Yeah.
Like not only are these words are playing in his head, but he's like, yeah, I know it's true. I know it's true. I'm a fail. Like he's still reeling with his failure. Yeah. And I think it all the more drives him crazy that this young 14-year-old boy is a better gunslinger, has achieved something he never will and never could.
Yeah, I mean it makes sense. Like this is one of those areas where you can empathize him. Like you can imagine some punk kid saying something to you, pointing out some deep personal vulnerability and failure of yours, and having it just stick in your head for days. It's totally realistic, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the other cool things we see is for the first time in the book, maybe Jonas finally starts estimating Roland properly. How much heart do they have? Jonas asked himself. It was a good question. Maybe the only one that mattered. I love that. How much heart? How much heart could these kids have? What are they going to do? Are they going to really challenge us now? Are they just going to flee and run away? Or are they have more planned after this? And of course, we know the answer is they have all the heart they need.
Yeah, right.
So he summons up all his men and puts together a group of 10 to immediately ride out to protect the Hanging Rock, with a larger force coming behind. And he says here he had bounded around his hillock. It was too late to go back, and now he felt horribly exposed. What I love about this is Jonas is still talking in Castle's terms, right? He's still talking in game terms. And we just had a moment where Roland said, the game is over. We're not playing games anymore. It's battle now. Like this isn't a game anymore. And I just think that is a really great way of demonstrating before the final showdown how these two people are operating on an entirely different level at this point. Because Jonas is still playing castles. Roland isn't.
Exactly. I think Roland rattled him, and I mean you could take it literally and say, Roland rattled him, shook his confidence, and made him make a fatal error, such that well, I don't know. I guess the ordering of events is wrong, but basically Roland, why do I get their names messed up? Jonas made a fatal error by emerging from his hillock prematurely. He pounced on them. He quote unquote got them, but he didn't account for all the variables, didn't consider Susan as a plausible actor in this scenario, which was sort of stupid because he knew about their affair. He knew she existed. He just completely overlooked her as a consideration. And really completely overlooked the idea that the boys might have any real allies in the town who would move on their behalf. Mm-hmm. And then, she springs them, and now he has emerged from his hillock, and now Roland gets to make his move. And based on our kind of pseudo understanding of how that game works, that means he's the one who actually screwed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So we cut back to Roland now, and he and his quartet escapes the exploding Sitco and heads back to the bad grass hut where he and Susan got it on a couple times, you know. I mean, basically any hideout they go to is like, and then we had sex there, and then we moved over there.
Yeah. Every building in Hambry, yes.
Yes. There's a lot of fun character interactions here, Matt, but I think the big one is Cuthbert finally telling Shimi his real name. And Shimi says, Key Youthbert. Shimi said, giggling, "Oh my, Key Youthbert. That's a funny name. No wonder you're such a funny fellow, Key Youthbert. Oh, that's a pip, a real pip." Man, you know Cuthbert is really such a stand-up guy because he doesn't bother to correct Shimi's mispronunciation here at all. Like, Shimi is pronouncing Cuthbert's name wrong, and he just doesn't correct him. What a guy.
What a guy. It amuses me that I continue along with this charade, despite the fact that I've heard the audiobook readers say it Cuthbert 10,000 times. But yeah, I did bust up at this part, especially Cuthbert's response. Cuthbert smiled and nodded. "Can I kill him now, Roland, if we don't need him any longer?"
That's because he's mad because he's pronouncing his name wrong.
Oh, I really did laugh at that. I just love that so much. I love Cuthbert.
I mean, in truth, this is literally Stephen King telling us how to pronounce the name.
Yes.
But here, the thing about me is no.
Yeah.
I
did say that maybe I'll just start saying Cuthbert, and then we can just get all of our bases covered, or just everyone will email us and tell us we're wrong. Either way.
Yeah. I mean, look, we've gotten so many emails telling us we're wrong, but I saw someone tried to tag Stephen King to tell us specifically we were wrong, and it didn't work. But maybe one day. Here's what I'll say right now. If Stephen King himself messages me and says, "Scott, stop pronouncing it Cuthbert," then and only then will I do so.
All right, that sounds good.
So Roland then takes Susan aside and talks to her about what she did and what she will need to do. "Thee disobeyed me in the matter of guns," he says. And I kind of like, Matt, the conversation between Roland and Susan here use thee and thou a lot I mean, it's been that way for a little bit, but it especially stood out to me in these chapters. Like, they're being very, very formal and kind of old school in their conversations here, which I think kind of channel the Shakespearean nature of this whole thing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel like, I don't know, maybe the book actually said this at some point. I feel like they're using like the high speech here, maybe, or at least a more formal mode. I don't know really. Yeah. But yeah, no, I get the Shakespeare connection for sure, because they're not quite speaking the way we speak. And just like Susan and Roland kind of slip into this way of, it's almost like they're speaking in a way that they imagine that lovers should speak.
Yeah.
A very young kid way of enacting their romance.
Like replaying what they've seen with their parents and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Although in Roland's case, I don't know.
Not so much.
Yeah. So yeah, he says she disobeyed him and she's like, "Yeah, what of it? I also saved you." And then he's like, "All right, fine. Good point. However, this time you seriously can't disobey me this time." He's basically telling her, "I'm going to leave you here at this hut where it's safe." And I'm going to go off and deal with these people. And if I don't come back this time, you got to go west for sure, for serious here. And I think it's in this moment, just once again turn on the tragedy a little bit, that Susan almost tells Roland about the child she carries, but at the last minute she decides not to. She's basically like, there's enough for him to worry about right now without having to think about my child. And you got to wonder, would Roland's choices have been different had he known that in this moment?
Yeah, maybe so. I think it's interesting to think about the role that Susan serves, in this part of the story, because Jonas overlooked her as a factor, and then she sprung the boys. But now Roland is overlooking her as a potential vulnerability. He's not considering, what he kind of just learned, which is that you need to keep a quartet together, or at least that's kind of an idea that is floating around. This idea that like he realizes that Susan is meant to help them, but maybe that maybe that means more than maybe he still hasn't really realized she's meant to stay with you. She's meant to be part of your unit. And you continually push her away. And every time you do that, you create a schism in this thing where it's supposed to be one for many, but you keep leaving the one out of the many.
Sure.
And you deny the Katet its power, and you leave her vulnerable. So, he tried to hide her. It was insufficient. So basically, just repeatedly, she's this kind of wild card that makes things go off the rails in both directions for kind of everybody in the story.
Yeah, I mean, frickin' girl walked into a sheriff's office and blew a deputy and the sheriff away by herself. She did that on her own. No help.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like now she can ride into war with us, but maybe stop like shoving her into the corner and saying, wait there until I'm done doing my men's work. Like maybe it's time for you to stop doing that.
Right. Yeah, I'm not saying she should have joined them in their assault necessarily, but she could have joined them in the field and then hung back or been kind of an outrider to tell them if anybody escaped. I don't know. I mean, maybe this is stupid, honestly, but what they didn't work either. So you're forced to ask, how could things have gone differently?
Right. Yeah. I think King wants you asking that for sure. So we then cut back to Jonas, and he's leading his small band forward towards Hanging Rock. We do start to see, and this is the moment that we start to see that, like the Ring of Power, Merlin's grapefruit has started to take Jonas. Jonas spurred his horse back to the head of the little column. He had decided to take the ball from Rhea at the slightest sign of trouble. In truth, it had already inserted its strange, addicting sweetness into his head. He thought about that single pink pulse of light he'd seen far too much. Balls, he told himself. Ball sweat's all I've got. Once this business is over, I'll be my old self again. Nice if true, but he had, in truth, begun to wonder.
Yeah. He knows it's got its hooks in him.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, like, he knows, and yet it doesn't change his behavior at all. Like, you've got me, but I'm cool with it. I'm cool with it.
Yeah, there's a sort of plotting nature to Jonas's character, a sort of straightforward ability to just not too much introspection in this fellow. He just kind of, I'm trying to make a parallel to Roland.
Well, I mean, one cool thing about that parallel is we see that Jonas is being kind of captured by the ball a little bit, and then at the end of this chapter, Roland himself looks in it and is trapped by it. That's the last line of the chapter. So once again, these kind of echoing, mirroring beats between our two characters here.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, as I predicted, it would be Elaine, but I predicted somebody would get their hands on the ball, and that it would grab them and show them something.
You did, and you were right. Well done.
Yes.
So elsewhere, Susan and Shimi prepare to say goodbye to Roland and his gunslinger pals, and I really love this moment. Get thy course in safety, Susan said as she drew back from him. Aye, Shimi added suddenly. Stand and be true, all three. He came forward himself and shyly touched Cuthbert's boot. Cuthbert reached down, took Shimi's hand, and shook it. Take care of her, old boy. Shimi nodded seriously. I will. This is so fascinating to me, Matt, because King has always written Shimi's voice to be a bit incorrect and wrong, like he's pronouncing words wrong, or he's using like kind of off contractions to kind of represent the disability he has. But here it almost seems like he's morphing into a different person. Like, not to make the Oi comparison again, but it seems like he's learning to speak better since he came to his quartet. He's understanding better, as if he's found his purpose, and that's focused him in a way that he's never been focused before. Yeah,
I really love that. I mean, you could say something similar about all of the quartet members that we've seen. The first one that jumped to mind is Eddie, probably because he's the first one that we saw who was, kind of uplifted from being like just a junkie to being sort of this heroic, dashing figure. And it's like when you're swept up by fate, when you're swept up by Ka, you may be in for some terrible end eventually, but you'll be like a much more whole and noble person on your way to that end. And I think that's one of the interesting wrinkles in what Ka might be, or what its nature might be. Like it's not necessarily gonna do right by you, but at least it might pull you into a situation where you can be who you were meant to be. Of course, there are plenty of people who he just kind of kills, like Jonas. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I like I don't know, Shimi's such a cool character, and seeing the way in which he changes over the course of this, it's like stand and be true. All three is just not a thing I thought would come out of Shimi's mouth when we first met him. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we get this moment. Sue, I love thee. She smiled. It was a beautiful smile. Bird and bear and hare and fish, she said, which has kind of become their like love mantra, which I kind of love. And then the section ends with, the next time Roland saw her, she was caught inside the wizard's glass, which is just Stephen being Stephen.
Yep.
It's just Stephen King.
Love it. Yep.
I love it. So it's time for the most heartbreaking passage of all, Matt. As Roland is sitting there in the grass waiting after he said goodbye to Susan, he starts thinking. Roland watched the silver clouds of dust racing each other across the desert floor and thought of Susan. He imagined them married, living in the freehold somewhere south of Gilead. By then, Farson would have been defeated, the world's strange decline reversed. The childish part of him simply assumed that making an end to John Farson would somehow see to that. And his gunslinging days would be over. Less than a year it had been since he had won the right to carry the 6 shooters he wore on his hips, and to carry his father's great revolvers when Stephen Duchesne had decided to pass them on, and already he was tired of them. Susan's kisses had softened his heart and quickened him, somehow, had made another life possible. A better one, perhaps. One with a house, and kitties, and then he's interrupted. And then he's interrupted, and... Ugh. This actually, Matt, reminded me, if we go back to the beginning of the year, to that moment in The Gunslinger where Roland is sitting there with Jake and he briefly thinks about turning back. He briefly thinks about turning around, walking out from under the mountain, taking Jake under his wing, training him, watching him grow up, just watching him become a gunslinger, and then maybe come back to the tower afterwards, and we'll both get to survive this time. Of course, he didn't there. And he won't hear either. Yeah,
I mean, the saddest part about this whole fantasy is that we see how Roland really doesn't like doing this. Like, he's already tired of this lifestyle when he's 14, but we know that he just keeps doing it forever.
Yeah,
he has this just conflicted, tortured nature as a character where he's compelled to keep doing this thing that makes him miserable because he has these obsessions that drive him. And it's just that to me, I mean, it's all sad that his hopes and dreams are dashed, but what's even worse, they're not just dashed, but he just keeps being this kind of this monster almost on into the future for decades.
Yeah. I mean, like, he was raised to be a gunslinger. It was all he ever knew. And then he got a taste of something else, and then not to be.
Yeah. It's tragic.
So as Jonas's traveling party is getting close enough for Elaine to sense them, the wizard's glass suddenly lights up, and Rhea invites Jonas back to look at it. And when Jonas looks into the glass, he sees not the gunslinger in his trap, but Susan, alone in the bad grass house with the red door. And like, once again, when he looks into this thing, he sees that luscious labial pink that begins to draw apart, which is once again connecting back to the sex of this thing, that this thing is tied to sex in every way. Its color, the descriptions, the adjectives used around it, what it does to people who touch it. It's tied back to this carnal kind of love. Yeah, banging,
lust power, lust magic, which has been a thing in this story from the literal beginning, where when Roland sees, I just had her name and then I blanked on it. The preacher woman whose very presence is like extremely erotic somehow. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's funny we never quite verbalized that particular connection to pink, but if we're calling pink lust and red love, then there's that obvious connection between pink and sex. Yeah, definitely. That labial pink. Yes. Gosh. So Jonas halts his men, realizing that the in-world boys know about the wizard's rainbow. He's freaking out about it because they want it too. He tells the rest of the men to wait for the larger party to come, and then he takes Renfrew and Reynolds with him and rides over to the house he just saw, the house with the red door, Susan's house. And
as we'll see, this leads to Susan being captured and brought back to Seafront. And this is the thing that's really interesting to me, because Merlin's grapefruit, did not show Jonas where Roland was. It did not stop the massacre that Roland and his two friends reap on all these men, these 40 men. It does just enough to get Susan out of the pocket of safety and into the hands of her enemies again, while still letting Roland win the day. What is going on here?
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I'm going to say some stuff, but I don't know. Like, I've remarked that the grapefruit is just really interested in Roland. The first thing it showed Rhea when Roland's crew is riding into town was Roland. What did I just say? Yeah, it showed Roland's crew riding into town. That was the first thing it showed. Then it showed Roland and Susan hooking up, and now it shows where Susan is. So it does seem like there's this evil eye guiding this grapefruit, and I think the evil eye may have some specific designs. I mean, it doesn't want good things to happen to Roland, but I'm also not sure that it wants Roland dead, because, like you pointed out, seems like it would have shown. If it had the option, it would have shown, okay, Roland and his crew are waiting in the tall grass for you. If it wanted him dead, instead, right. I think it wants him destroyed, and by that I mean, so it's been a while since we talked about this, but like we were saying a while back, like the Man in Black and whatever power he's aligned with, they don't necessarily want to stop Roland from reaching the tower. I think they might just want to make sure that if he reaches the tower, then he's going to be the beast. You know, he's going to be, he's not going to have goodness in his heart anymore. He's going to have given up so much of himself that it's almost worse for this person who reaches the tower. And the idea that, okay, well, we can't stop him. Well, let's kill his true love. That's a great way to bring a man low and to turn him into something worse, you know. Or even, you know, you could say if he wanted to retire and just have a life with Susan, okay, well, that doesn't help him get to the tower. Let's kill her. Make sure that he, maybe it actively wants to keep him on the path to the tower. It's just, you know, that's something I hadn't considered until right now, actually, this idea that maybe the evil forces actually want him to get to the tower. They just want him to get to the tower in a certain state. I don't know. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of possibilities. I definitely don't feel clear on it yet. I don't feel like I'm supposed to know. I don't feel like King wants us to guess it yet, but it's definitely fun to think about.
Yeah. That's all really interesting. I think you're spot on as far as the revelation that the grapefruit did not show the trap. It did not show the trap that they were about to. It did not save Jonas's life. It doesn't care about that. What it did care about, what it came alive to do, was show him where Susan was.
Yep.
And yeah, that seems significant.
Definitely.
Yeah. So when they turn back and they head back to meet up with the larger group, and Elaine realizes this, and we get this beautiful line from Roland. Jonas is afraid of us, Roland said. He wants more men around him when he comes. That's what it is, what it must be. Unaware that he was both right and badly out in his reckoning, unaware that for one of the few times since they had left Gilead, he had lapsed into a teenager's disastrous certainty. Oh my God, that's so good. That's so good.
Yeah.
I love that King likes to sometimes subtextually hint at Roland's youth and how it gets it in trouble, and sometimes likes to just textually point it out. Likes to just say, look, here's a moment where Roland's youth and inexperience screws him over.
Yeah, right. And it's cool that even in that moment, he's kind of giving him some credit, because it's like, yeah, he was right, but also wrong.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He was definitely right about part of it, that he wants more men because he's scared of them, 100%. But he misses the important part. He misses Susan.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you think if there was some kind of telepathic quartet thing, he would realize she's in danger.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that makes me think like this. Their quartet doesn't seem to have the kind of magical, obviously magical advantages that Roland's present day quartet has. That was one of the things that made me think, like, I don't know if this is like a legit quartet. But I don't know.
So we cut back to Susan, and she wakes up to find Jonas pointing a gun at her. And really, the only thing I wanted to talk about in this section was something really interesting that I kind of reached on a little bit, but I'll just see how you feel about it. Jonas calls Susan Sunbeam, and he uses that word sunbeam over and over again. And I think it's a very interesting choice of a nickname in a book that is absolutely stuffed with moons, moon imagery everywhere. The passing of the different types of moon represent the passage of time, as well as the movement of the story into darker and darker moments. We start from the kissing moon and we move to where now we're back to the demon moon. And in this book, Susan is a beam of sun here. Shine, little sunbeam, Jonas says. And I think that's really fascinating. It really jumped out at to me as like, this is an intentional bit of imagery King is doing here. The contrast of the moons ruling the book, and Susan is this little sunbeam who will not defeat the moon.
I like that. All I really have to potentially add to that is like there's a lot of stars and moons and now suns. So that there's we've got this idea of there being star-crossed lovers and constellations. We've got the different moons that are ominous, and sure, why not throw the sun in there if we've got all these heavenly bodies dancing around in the story?
Sure.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, cool.
Sure. So Shimi watches this all from his spot in the grass where he just so happened to be going to the bathroom when they showed up, and he decides that his only option is to follow Susan to wherever they're taking her, which is, it's almost cruel because like, you're just like, well, he's going to get her out. He's going to free her. And then we're like, well, wait a minute. We know she dies here. So like, it's just mean. It's just mean.
Yeah, right. I still don't really understand Ka very well, Scott.
That's okay, Matt.
It is.
You're not supposed to.
It is mean. It is mean.
Mm-hmm. So Susan reaches the rest of Jonas's army of 40 men with their little band. And one of the most satisfying moments this week to me is when she confronts Fran Lingle about his role in her father's death. I just think like this is so damn satisfying to see these shitty people just completely dressed down. Like Susan just rips into him and he feels it too. He like shrinks away from her and hides from her because he's so embarrassed.
Oh yeah. I mean, you get the sense that her beat down here is going to stick with this guy for the rest of his long 15-minute life.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it does. Definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I can't wait. I can't wait to get there. We're almost there.
Yes.
So Jonas takes this moment after joining the rest of the group to get rid of Rhea of the Coups and take the ball back from her. Once again, she holds it up, threatening to smash it before she handed it over, but he calls her bluff this time and just takes it and throws her away. He grabbed the bag just below the draw top and yanked. Rhea screamed again as the string skinned her knuckles and tore off one of her nails. Jonas hardly heard. His mind was a white explosion of exultation. For the first time in his long professional life, he forgot his job, his surroundings, and the 6,000 things that could get him killed on any day. He had it. He had it by all graves of all the gods. He had the fucking thing. Mine, he thought, and that was all. He somehow restrained the urge to open the bag and stick his head inside, like a horse sticking its head into a bag of oats, and looped the drawstring over the pommel of his saddle twice instead. So he takes the ball from her, tosses her out, and then immediately takes ownership of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You know, I'm trying to do some mapping here where it's like Jonas has split up his quartet, as it were. Roland has split up his quartet, and it's like almost immediately after he kicks out Rhea that everything completely goes to shit for him. So it's like he's basically just got him and Reynolds, right?
Yeah, DePape. He said Reynolds is the one that's taking Susan back to Seafront.
Reynolds is so Reynolds and potentially Coral are like the only two who make it out of this, and it's basically because his quartet wasn't like together. I mean, I'm being a bit artistic here, but like Jonas had split his quartet too far and wide, and thus Roland, even though he had also split his quartet, he still had his three core guys. So that's why he wins. I don't know, man. I don't know. But like I do think, you know, what we're really showing here with this scene where he finally gets the grapefruit is how addled his thinking has become, right? He's like going back and forth between being like unsettled and self-doubting because of Roland's precision guided verbal barb that just undermined his whole soul. And then on the flip side, he's got this new cursed object that's like slowly eating his mind. So he's like disabled mentally now at this point.
Yeah. Did you think, I mean, I'm trying to think if I want to even make this complaint. It felt to me this time reading it that the pivot to, oh, now Jonas is being manipulated by this thing happened very, very quickly.
Didn't bother me because I'll explain exactly why. I loved that, like, from the moment that Roland said his beatdown, Jonas was done for, basically. So every subsequent like deterioration and mistake Jonas makes after that point, to me, is just like the house of cards has already started to fall. There was no stopping it, and
Gotcha.
and so this is just part of that sequence of events, to my mind.
Yeah. So you could argue that Roland's barb is what opens a wound that gets the ball in.
Yeah.
And says, okay, it's business time.
Yeah. I think that's how I like to think about it. Because honestly, the way Jonas goes out, it's almost like shockingly anticlimactic. But I think that the fun way to think about it that makes it really satisfying is, well, it's not shocking, it's not anticlimactic, it's the inevitable result of what Roland said to this guy. Like that was the climactic moment. This is just the resolution of all of that. Anyway,
so Rhea then proceeds to curse each and every one of them, Matt, and we know how their stories will end, right? Like they're all going to die. So I think once again, this allows us to draw a parallel between Cord and Rhea. Last chapter, Cord curses Susan. This chapter, these men are cursed. All will end up dead, right? Everyone that has been cursed is going to end up dead. And I think it's just a really fascinating way of drawing attention to these curses and showing that, like, no, I do not think that it is the curses themselves that are damning these people, but it gives power to this idea. It gives power to this idea of this curse. And especially in this moment where, like, Shimi is, like we said, Shimi is continuing to follow Susan back to Seafront and offering us this little crumb of hope that we want to hold on to. And yet we have these curses in the back of our heads, and we're, like, proceeding to watch them come true bit by bit.
Yeah. Well, that's the great thing about cursing people is that bad things are always going to happen, and then you can take responsibility for those things.
Yeah, hell yeah.
That's why I curse. That's why I curse people so often.
Oh, you do you? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who crosses me, really.
Just ruin someone's day because it's like they get a flat tire.
Damn it, Matt. Yeah.
That curse.
Yeah.
You wield too much power, sir.
I know.
So, back at Cord's house, our two sides of the same coin finally meet each other, Matt, as Rhea approaches and begs for help. And when she mentions Susan, Cord is suddenly totally on board. And then some really weird shit happens.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Would ye pay her back, Rhea asked, for that's why I've come to ye. Miss oh so young and pretty, Cordelia murmured in a barely audible voice. The hand not holding the knife floated up to her face and touched her ash-smeared cheek. Yes, I'd repay of her, so I would. To the death? Aye, hers or mine. 'Twill be hers, Rhea said. Never fear it. Now refresh me, Cordelia. Give me what I need. And then Rhea drinks Cordelia's blood.
Yeah, out of her, like, belly.
Yeah.
It's gross.
It's gross, but it's also terrifying, right?
Yeah, it's a great, Stephen King horror moment. I gotta say how like unsettling and creepy and awful this Miss Oh So Young and Pretty thing has become. It's just it's such a great, like the first few times she says it, it's like, okay, I get it. Like she resents, she sort of mockingly resents that her niece is young and a bit naive, and it's like you could see it as a gentle mocking, like a gentle kind of of something that even a mother might say to a daughter, not meaning it in a mean way. And at this point, it's like encapsulates her whole rage and resentment and loathing and jealousy and all of these things that she feels towards her niece to the point of murder. And it's so much creepier. It's just I'm always going to remember Miss Oh So Young and Pretty. And also it's one of those things that's Miss Oh So Young and Pretty. Like it has a certain sound that just is very sticks in your mind.
I do think this is something that King likes to do, and when he does do it, does it very well, as he takes these oft repeated phrases and through their repetition dials up the creepiness and the horror of it. I mean, the one I'm thinking of that jumps to my head right this minute is come on and take your medicine from The Shining. This is what Jack Torrance told his son, and it becomes this like repetitive line of just fear, because he just like it turns from I'm gonna punish you for a bad thing that you've done, which normally ends up in the alcoholic Jack Torrance like hurting his kid, to he's gonna fucking murder him. He's gonna kill him. And it's just like it takes this phrase and just through repetition makes it even more and more horrifying. It's great.
Yeah, cool.
So we go back to the tall grass, and it's time for some action. Roland and his friends manage to stay hidden as Jonas's army walks by, and then just the most wonderful badass line ever. "Mount up," he said. "Reapings come." Fuck. I love it. And I love this part too. The wind howled high and lonesome, carrying big drifts of gritty dust under a cloudless dark blue sky. Demon Moon stared down from it like a filmed eye of a corpse. 200 yards ahead, the Drogue riders backing Jonas's party were spread out in a line of 3, their sombreros jammed down tight on their heads, their shoulders hunched, their serapes blowing. Roland moved so that Cuthbert rode in the middle of their trio. Bert had a slingshot in his hand. Now he handed Elaine half a dozen steel balls, and Roland another half dozen. Then he raised his eyebrows questioningly. Roland nodded, and they began to ride. Dust blew past them in rattling sheets, sometimes turning the Drogue riders into ghosts, sometimes obscuring them completely. But the boys closed in steady. Roland rode tense, waiting for one of the Drogues to turn in his saddle and see them. But none did. None of them wanted to put his face into the cutting, grit-filled wind, nor was there a sound to warn them. There was a sandy hardpack under the horse's hooves now, and it didn't give away much. It's just like the wind is howling, the demon moon is in the middle of daylight looking down on them, the wind is in their favor, the hard pan masks the noise, and here they go, and here we go.
Yeah, this is one of those moments where like everything is aligning for them, right? Like sure it's an ambush, they had some degree of planning behind it, but yeah, the wind is in their favor, the dust is in the air, everything's lining up for them. Like fate is on their side in this.
Yeah. And Cuthbert manages to take down 9 of the party before any of them even notice what is happening. Roland then opens fire and takes out the 10th before they charge, screaming, "Heil, heil! To me, gunslingers, to me, ride them down, no prisoners." And it's not even a battle, really. It's just a slaughter. It's 3 versus 30. And it's an absolute slaughter. And we see all the men from around town we knew, right? Brian Hokey, the blacksmith, Hash Renfrew, Langle, whose silly machine gun gets stuck on his duster and he can't get it out. All these people are just casually blown away.
Yep.
It's remarkable.
Yep. I mean, it's funny because I don't know, like this is one of those things where we haven't talked about this in a while, but like I really, it depresses me that this is never going to be made into like a TV show, because this is like the most cinematic imaginable scene, you know, like you really want to see this, right? Because I mean, part of it is that King just does kind of blow through the description of it. It's like they're just riding around, just shooting everybody. It would actually get repetitive if he described it in detail. But that doesn't stop you from kind of wanting to be in this moment of carnage and retribution and justice.
Yeah, it is. It's mindless, and it's mindless in the way we've seen Roland become in the middle of battle before. Right? He goes cold. Roland had no thought of retreating or perhaps jigging to one side or another. He had, in fact, no thoughts at all. The fever had descended over his mind, and he burned with it like a torch inside a glass sleeve. Screaming through the reins caught in his teeth, he galloped toward Hash Renfrew and the three men behind him. It's just like he's not even thinking anymore. This is just the battle fury.
Yeah.
Has taken hold.
Yeah, that gunslinger fever and coldness that he's talked about. It's perfect. Yeah.
And he blows away DePape like he's nothing, like he's not even a character.
Right.
He just blows him away. It's nothing. DePape does nothing. And the whole time Jonas is kind of just standing there shocked. This can't be happening, Jonas thought stupidly. It can't. There are too many of us. But it was happening. The in-world boys had struck unerringly at the fracture line, or performing what amounted to a textbook example of how gunslingers were supposed to attack when the odds were bad. And Jonas's coalition of ranchers, cowboys, and tough town boys had shattered. And I love that Jonas knows enough about gunslinger technique that he knows exactly what's happening here, and he's just powerless to do anything about it.
Well, what's great is that he's not powerless. He has a gun. It just hasn't occurred to him that he could, like, this is how shaken, this is what I love about this. He's so shaken and like unmanned by it that he doesn't even draw his gun. His first thought isn't even about the gun. This guy who was supposed to be a gunslinger, his first thought is, the grapefruit. He holds up the grapefruit. Don't shoot me. I've got the grapefruit. It's only after Roland takes that away from him that he tries to draw, and then it's too late.
Yeah, you're right. He does. I mean, the thing that I love about it is he does exactly what Rhea had done 2 times before, which is making it a nice little 3-beat, right? He threatens to break the ball in order to manipulate the person in front of him.
Yep.
And what I love about it is when Rhea did it, the first time it worked, the second time it didn't. When Rhea did this exact same thing, Jonas, you called her bluff and took it from her. And in this moment, Roland calls his bluff and basically just shoots him right in the hand. It's like, fuck you. Yeah. Shoots it in the hand, catches it mid-gallop, and then unloads 2 shots point blank at him.
In his face, in literal face.
Yeah.
Oh.
And yeah, like you're absolutely right that he doesn't even try to draw until it's gone. Give it back, you brat. Jonas clawed under his serape and brought out another gun. Give it back, it's mine. Not anymore, Roland said.
Yeah.
And fired 2 point blank rounds right into Jonas's face. It is almost anticlimactic in how just dominated Jonas was. Like, this is a guy we've talked about. Like, he's been built up. He's smart. He's clever. He's resourceful. He has gunslinger training. He just didn't quite make it. And this 14-year-old gunslinger just it's almost effortless.
Yeah. He doesn't get a shot off, right? Mm-hmm. And it's funny. It almost justifies this idea that you pick your gunslingers via this test. Because, I mean, in the end, Jonas wasn't a gunslinger.
He wasn't.
He did not act as a gunslinger when it was down to it, right? We know like Roland has picked out the qualities of a gunslinger, and that is like when it gets down to the wire, you go cold and you get serious and you do what needs to be done. You don't freeze up and you don't think, oh, how is this possible? This can't be happening, and then somebody shoots you in the face.
Yeah. So. I mean, did Jonas shoot with his heart? Did he aim with his mind? He didn't do any of that.
No, he was completely zoned out. He was preoccupied. Yeah.
Yep. And that is the difference between a gunslinger and not. And the thing that I love about this is that, like, before this moment, I think the 3 of them are talking and they're like, this is what it's always been. Prove or die. Prove that you are who you are, or die. And they proved it now. And so, like, there's this hint that Elaine and Cuthbert, though not officially, have tested the line by surviving this battle and are gunslingers now as well, officially.
Yeah, I love it. Cool.
Yeah. But as they prepare to leave, Roland, against the wishes of his quartet, takes a look at Marilyn's grapefruit and is immediately lost within it, the text says. We don't even know what that quite means yet. But, I mean, like Rhea before him, is kind of sucked in immediately. And we'll have to wait till next week to see what he sees in there. But got any ideas?
Susan?
I
mean, maybe something back in Gilead would be my second guess, but or I guess third guess, the tower.
Okay.
I'm thinking likely Susan though. Like,
okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, we'll find out next week.
All right.
Maybe we'll never find out. I don't know.
Yeah. Fair.
All right. That is it. That is it for this week's reading. Next week, we are finishing up part 3, Come Reap. We're talking about chapter 10, Under the Demon Moon 2. It's 2.
Okay.
Under the Demon Moon 2.
Cool.
Because we're back under the demon.
Oh, we're back in. Okay. Gotcha. Makes sense.
Because there was a chapter called Under the Demon Moon earlier in the book. So this is Under the Demon Moon, parentheses, 2.
I gotcha.
All right, let's move on to our audience discussion question. And we are going to have to go very, very fast on this one, Matt, because as I mentioned at the top of the show, we got a lot of answers to this question, a lot of good answers to this question, and we want to read as many of them as we can. So we're going to kind of fly through these. We're not going to talk about it as much as we normally did, but a lot of really interesting choices here.
All right.
So we start with Gilead 1973, who says, I have to say Bill, Jerome, and Holly from the Mr. Mercedes books. I love how each of their individual strengths contribute to their working style as a group. It makes for a very entertaining and interesting read every time.
Cool.
Yeah, that answer has come up. These books have come up as answers to other things, and I really enjoy these books. Stephen King doing these kind of murder mystery stories is really fascinating to me.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't even really heard of that. That's cool. Matt Said Words says, one of my favorite 5-man bands consists of Stu Redmond, Glenn Bateman, Larry Underwood, Ralph Bretner, and Kojak from The Stand. Honorable mention goes out to Nick Andros and Tom Cullen. Moon, that spells Tom and Nick. Laws, yes. I don't know what that means, but cool.
I know you don't, but I do.
Okay.
And I like it. So we have Perry Jane, who says the first example that came to mind is not literature, but TV. Buffy the Vampire Slayer's Scooby Gang has the core 3, but also includes Giles, Anya, Tara, Oz, Riley, and Spike at various points in the show. Each have a very specific contribution to make to the group, and the show reinforces again and again that our protagonist would not have survived as long without the help of her friends. My second thought was My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. The main 6 isn't 5 or 7, but it's about as quartet as it gets. But I really wanted to mention the quartet in one of my favorite YA novels, The Girl with the Silver Eyes by Willow Davis Roberts. Spoiler if you've never read the book, but you should read it, so stop reading this and go read the book. I'm not going to do it. I got too many books to read, Jane. And Jane goes into that book a little bit, but we won't spoil that for people.
Okay, cool. Sounds fun. Idolin Jones says, I love Buffy just as much as Scott does, and could easily write paragraphs about the Scoobies as a quartet. Instead, I'm going to choose the crew of Angel Investigations from the Buffy spinoff. Angel is a dark, mysterious leader running from a past that haunts him, who slowly opens up and becomes more human over the course of the series. His quartet comprises of numerous members, some good and some bad trying to atone, but all of them running from something. Whether it's a soulmate who is duty-bound to slay members of your kind, a hell dimension that you were trapped in for years, or a small town you left because you wanted something better. The lineup changes, some members leave or die, and other members join. The quartet breaks and is reforged into something stronger several times, but everyone that joins it does so because of their new shared purpose, to help the helpless. Where Buffy is a show about overcoming the odds and sacrificing in order to win against evil, Angel is a show about how sometimes, no matter how hard you fight, evil wins, but that doesn't mean you stop fighting. It's this idea that binds together Angel, Fred, Doyle, Gunn, and everyone else who joins the Angel Investigations tet.
Wow, what a good answer. These are pretty good shows here. Also, Eric T says, the Scooby Gang. Xander is a way better Oi than Rhea. Hey, Matt, what's the next answer?
The next answer, actually lost track. Are we on Rob the Gob? No, we're on Susan S. Susan S says Scooby Gang from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Each character makes important contributions to form a powerful force to combat the evil of the Hellmouth.
I don't know if our listeners of Kingslingers know about this.
They don't.
But folks, it's like my thing to get Matt to watch Buffy. It's like my thing. So whenever you answer these questions with answers from Buffy, I get to gloat a little bit and be like, hey, Matt, look, everyone that likes this book also really seems to like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Maybe, I don't know, watch it.
All right, yeah.
So Lynette B gives a whole bunch of answers here, 10 actually different answers. We're only going to read a few of them. The first one she lists is the crew of Serenity. And okay, folks, I got some emails about how people were mad about my Serenity joke. I love Serenity a lot. Or Firefly a lot. I do think it's a good show. My point is that for a while there, and I think this has cooled off a little bit, but for a while there, it was like one of the most like loved and revered shows ever. And my point was that I do not think it would have been that revered if not for the cancellation.
Yeah.
I think it's a good show. I enjoy the characters. I completely agree with you. The crew of the Serenity is a great quartet. But that was just my point. That's all.
Yeah, I like it too. I agree that it's not like the best thing ever, but yeah, it's very, very enjoyable. Very enjoyable show.
Mm-hmm. Lynette also lists Frodo, Sam, Gimli, Aragorn, Boromir, Pippin, Merry, and Legolas, and Gandalf, of course. So I figured you would like that one because that's.
I do.
Matt,
like
you didn't mention Lord of the Rings this episode at all. You're talking about fucking Odysseus up in here. What the fuck,
I know,
Matt?
I'm sorry. It's really off brand for me. I'll try to stop talking about Greek tragedies because I mean, who cares about those?
Yeah, who cares about the Greeks?
I know.
Oh God, we have some listeners from Greece. They're probably like, "What
Son
the
of a
fuck?"
bitch.
But in Greek. Obviously.
Yes, of course. Rob the Gob says, other than the quartet in the Dark Tower, I would have to say the kids from It would be a favorite of mine. Like in the Dark Tower, each member of the Losers Club is chosen seemingly by fate or Ka. They seem to have a preternatural sense of who's part of their group, and when all the kids are together for the first time, they all feel that their circle is complete. It's really cool and slightly ominous moment.
Yeah, and Public Defender 716 also says the Losers Club from It. And I think that's one fun thing we see that King does is he doesn't give them the names, but he does create groups of characters. And not just, this isn't even just like, this is a really great group of characters that I really love. This is a group of characters that is textually special in some way, textually linked in some way. And he likes to do this without giving it that exact name. And the Losers Club from It is 100% one of those groups.
You know, it's funny because now that I understand like Stephen King's Dark Tower multiverse universe idea, every other book I'm going to read of his, I'm going to be like, yep, that's a quartet, that's Ka, that's it's probably the beam involved somehow in this scene.
Yeah. And you're going to have fun. And that's why I decided to start with the Dark Tower, not end with the Dark Tower.
Well, that's fine. I'm totally cool with this. All right. Next from Fast Randall, they say, one of my favorite quartets is Dale Cooper and the rest of the Bookhouse Boys in Twin Peaks. Through Ka, Cooper comes to the town of Twin Peaks and quickly forms strong bonds with Truman, Hawk, and the rest of the gang to fight the evil in the woods. The personal moments between the characters make it too easy to fall in love with them. Never seen Twin Peaks. Always heard great things about Twin Peaks. Seems like a thing they should watch.
Yeah, we're going to have to do a Lynch thing someday.
Yeah.
That we've never talked about David Lynch on a podcast seems
weird.
It seems wrong to me.
It seems improbable at this point.
Yeah, I agree. We've done so many episodes. Next, we have Man from Zimmer, who says their favorite Tet from another book is the crew from the Rocinante from the Expanse series. Great collection of righteous misfits that are individually compelling and with well fleshed out backstories.
Yeah, I love them too. We've done a few podcasts about the book and the TV and the first season of the TV show.
Correct. We did a Doofcast on the first season, and we did a book club on Leviathan Wakes. Yeah. So
go check those out on the Doofcast if you're interested.
Yeah, I would really love to get into those series more. We actually, some of our network partners, Elliot and Ruben, they did a whole thing called Pilot Season where they were kind of trying to figure out what they wanted their next show to do. So they did a pilot episode of like 6 or 7 different shows. And one of them was a series diving into the Expanse in a similar way that you and I are diving into Dark Tower. I don't know. They have not yet decided which they're actually doing, so I don't know if it's that one, but that would be fun to see. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, Anthony Sosa says Holden, Naomi, Amos, Alex, and Miller from The Expanse. Yep, we love them.
I'm sure Elliot will be very excited to hear that because he loves those books.
Yeah.
So the amazing Duck 42 says, one of my favorite quartets in other literature are the Rat Queens. They are the leads of a D&D-esque comic book of the same name and are spectacular. The main cast are well-written, fully realized characters who are present presented as both badasses and with their own flaws. Plus, it's orcs and dwarves and fairies and whatnot, and that's always a straight up win for me. Honorable mention goes to Scooby, Shaggy, Velma, Fred, and Daphne. Zoinks.
Awesome. I haven't heard of that. That's cool. All right.
You have heard of Scooby-Doo.
I've heard of Scooby-Doo. Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Megs says, I would have to say my favorite Kotet besides Roland's would be the 7 from the Heroes of Olympus series. Rick Riordan does a great job of fleshing out each of these characters and making you relate to them. Each has their own abilities that help the group, and each is drastically different, and yet you really feel for all of them. Also, I just love Percy Jackson. He's a badass son of a god.
You know, I've never read those books, the Percy Jackson series. I did see the first movie, but that's the most I've gotten to that series.
Yeah, I read something like about them recently that made them seem more appealing and like thoughtful than I had previously assumed, because I just saw them as part of the like wave of YA novels that came out around the time of the Hunger Games and sort of undifferentiated, but I think that there might be more to them than I was assuming.
I kind of want to give them a read eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
In my huge amount of free time.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, answers like this really encourages me too.
Yeah.
Next we have Bisexual Punch Party, who says, my favorite Kotet would be the kids from Hinamizawa in the anime series Higurashi. They form an incredible bond by playing silly games for high stakes when it comes in handy when they later face real-life challenges for even higher ones. You come to the series for the horror, but stay for the deep relationships between everyone in the Kotet.
Cool. Don't know about that, but I believe you.
Anime.
Yeah, never heard of that, but cool.
It's great.
Cool. Andrew L. gives us a long answer. They say, favorite Kotet outside of Roland is tough, but a squad that has always come to mind while reading about Roland is Geralt of Rivia and his team that he assembles to get back Ciri. Is this a Witcher thing? Is this the Witcher? I think
this is a Witcher thing.
See, because I don't know the Witcher. They say they couldn't stop thinking of Geralt at one point while we were talking about Roland. That they at first seem to be very, very similar. They're hard badasses. They can't be killed. They have little or no sense of humor. And when you dive a little deeper, though, they tend to differ on some major points. Not to get too spoilery, but Geralt does not mess with destiny and tries to defer to it whenever he can. It never works for him. Being the stubborn character he is, that doesn't stop him. Roland, on the other hand, is so fast to toss things up to Ka whenever possible, and instead of defying it, allows it to guide him through his quest. And then they go into all the different members of the Kotet, of Geralt's Kotet, and how they actually parallel in some ways to Susanna, Eddie, Oy, and Jake, which is pretty cool. I'm not going to read all of the detail, but we appreciate you going into it, and it is pretty cool to see this level of complexity in your analysis here.
Yeah, that's another book series I really have been meaning to get into, but never have. I bounced hard off the Netflix show. I couldn't do it. I was like, nope, I'm out. But I've heard good things about the books.
I thought was it a game first or was it books first?
It was books first and then a game and then a show.
Okay, cool.
So we have Luke V, who says, within King's work, it's hard to top the Kotet of the Losers Club from It. I agree with you, Luke. We have already talked about that one a little bit. But they go on to say, outside of King's work, I would like to mention two noble Kotets, the first of which being the Gentleman Bastards from the series of the same name by Scott Lynch. Each member has their own distinct voice and personality, while seemingly so real in such a fantastical fictional setting. Yeah, Matt and I are big fans of the series. We've done book club episodes on all 3 of the released books, actually. Yeah. Although I think I was a little more cold on the third one than I was on the previous 2.
We did love the first 2, and we talked very much about them.
Yes, we did. So if you want to, I feel like these questions are just us advertising other shows, but we've done 2 hours on all 3 of these books.
Don't let them realize that's why we have a Q&A section, Scott.
Oh, no, you're not supposed to. I'll delete it. I'll delete it. They'll never hear it. Okay. It's fine. The other thing that they mention is 7 Pilgrims of the Final Shrike Pilgrimage in the first 2 novels of the Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons.
Hey, Scott. We did a book club on that book.
We did.
Check it out on the Doofcast feed.
God, we're terrible. We're shameless. These 7 are another group of incredibly fleshed out characters with rich backstories who come together for a united purpose. While there really isn't a clear leader of this particular quartet, there is the classic archetype of the trash mouth in Martin Selenius, the badass gunslinger in both Cassad and Braun Lamia, and the other non-Dark Tower archetypes, including the scholar, the politician, and the priest. I feel the Hyperion Cantos is one of the most underrated, under-the-radar sci-fi novels, and that every fan of the genre should read. Yeah, I want to finish those up, Matt, because we read the first one and we liked it, and it's pretty cliffhanger-y.
Yeah.
And we just moved on with our lives.
Yeah, I just loved everything about that book. Really, it really stuck with me, honestly. And it's weird that I haven't moved on, but we do read a lot of stuff. So
yes, we do.
Awesome.
Let's see what other episodes we can talk about on our show here with our next.
Let's do that. Christina L says many of my favorite quartets are groups of kids who are suddenly thrown into situations that force them to deal with something way above their maturity level and experience. For example, E.T., Super 8, and It. Stephen King writes the kids especially well in The Body, Stand By Me. I don't know what that is. They say
The Body is the name of the short story. Stand By Me is the name of the movie based on the short story.
I gotcha. They say that there's a group that travels train tracks in the heat of summer so they can see a dead body. They experience unforgettable moments they will remember for the rest of their lives, and this is a story that they go back to often.
Have you never seen Stand By Me,
I've
Matt?
never seen Stand By Me.
Oh boy. We're gonna have to do a whole thing.
I've never heard of Stand By Me.
This is really upsetting to me.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
It's about the loss of innocence. It's a seminal work of American film.
Sounds serious. I don't like things that are serious.
I hate you.
Cool. I guess Scott's gonna make me watch this at some point. So thanks, Christina L. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And you know who else is going to make you watch it? Mark P, because they also answer the Stand By Me crew. Great friends. I agree, Mark.
Okay, sure. Yes. RJ Sebastian says all the characters in Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas is definitely a story where something very Ka-like is happening, right? There's fates and reincarnation and all these things are playing into the story. Yeah.
I have actually never read that book, and I really need to, because I love the movie. Hey Matt, we did an episode on the Cloud Atlas movie.
Oh my God, yeah, we did. I forgot about that.
That was part of our Deconstructing the Wachowskis.
Yeah, where we
series.
did an episode on each movie of the Wachowskis, including the Matrix movies.
Yes. I love David Mitchell though. I think he's a fantastic writer, and yet I haven't read Cloud Atlas. I don't know. I don't have an excuse here. I just need to read this book.
Yeah.
I just really
I need Let me know if it's good, Scott.
Will do. Jerime W says the Hat Creek Cattle Company from Lonesome Dove. Gus, Woodrow, Pete, Dietz, and Newt are my favorite quartet in all of literature. I've traveled to the tower a few times, but I've rode to Montana with Gus and crew almost annually. You know, Matt, this is another book I've never read, but one of my TV podcasts called The Watch on The Ringer, both of those hosts just randomly decided to read Lonesome Dove, and they're obsessed with it. And so now I want to read Lonesome Dove.
Cool. My mom sort of has always talked about Lonesome Dove as a super important thing that she loves, and I tend to trust her taste in things.
I think it's an us pick'em coming up on the book club. Maybe we do Cloud Atlas or Lonesome Dove.
Yeah. All right. Let's try to remember that. Cool.
Okay.
Jeremy says, from the Charlie Parker series by John Connolly, the series starts with Every Dead Thing. Quartet is Charlie Parker, the private investigator who's been through hell, Angel and Lois, the homosexual couple consisting of a master thief and a retired hitman. Great series. Cool.
I have never heard of this series.
Yeah, me neither.
Charlie Parker sounds very familiar to me, and yet...
Well, isn't it like a
none
musician?
Of this well, yeah, he's the saxophonist, but that's not what I meant. It's did they make a movie about this?
I don't know.
I feel like they might have made a movie about this. I think I'm going crazy.
You're going crazy, but also I don't know. I mean, I just haven't heard of it myself.
Okay. Next we have X Ross, who says Pierce Brown's Howlers from the Red Rising series, another series I have not read. so I can't say much about that.
Me neither. And then, wait a second. Does that have to do with like Red Dawn? I don't know. Never mind. Ian B says, I think many of King's novels, especially post Dark Tower, make use of katets, namely Hodges, Jerome, and Holly. Some can be seen in the characters of Dr. Sleep and the Institute, which should have had a Dark Tower connection. There are many outside of King's work, of course, but one that came to mind as soon as I heard the question that would make for a good discussion is the Wu-Tang Clan. I think to make a good katet, everyone needs agency and to be a singular, independent, and dynamic force. Oh man, I can name several bands that would make good katets. That's great. I love that. Oh my God, this is such a fun idea. That's such a fun framing.
That's really fun. I feel like a Wu-Tang Clan documentary just came out very recently. Maybe I'm making something up again.
I think I heard about a Wu-Tang Clan documentary. I don't know if it came out recently or not, but that's maybe,
within like the last year or so. I don't know. I don't know. Time is flat circle.
See, now I want to think about real life katets.
Oh my God. Yeah, we should have framed it like that.
But this, I mean, so I am a bit surprised that no one put forth Hank Hill, Dale Gribble, Bill Dauterive, and Boomhauer, the most core katet in the history of storytelling.
Are you?
But,
are you?
I mean,
I like King of the Hill, but
I don't think you like it enough, Scott.
Clearly not.
Anyway.
All right. Thank you again for everyone who sent in those questions. There was a ton of them, and it was so fun to read them and see. And like, as always, write a list of things that Matt needs to watch down. Ever increasing list. I can't believe you haven't seen Stand By Me. I'm legitimately upset with you.
We've created a machine that basically lengthens the list faster than I could ever possibly. It's sort of like Midworld, how it is growing and stretching out faster than you can cross it.
Yeah.
That's my reading list.
You're never going to get to the tower, in which case the tower is a place where you can be done making podcasts.
The only way would be if I found some sort of really high speed locomotive.
No, that's entirely too dangerous.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm going to do what I have to do, Scott.
Sure you are. Watch Buffy.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to next week's question. This is a fun one. I think kind of reframing it about what we were talking about with Rhea and with Jonas and with whatever the fuck is going on with this Crimson King guy. I want you folks to talk to me about the nature of evil in Stephen King's world. What is evil?
Yeah. Without spoiling.
Yes, please no spoilers for anything past this moment in the Dark Tower we are in right now. Talk to me about evil. If you are new to Stephen King, just talk about what you've seen in these past 4 books, what evil is. If you are a constant reader like me, you can reference any other book you want besides book 5, 6, and 7 of the Dark Tower. Please.
Can't wait.
I think it's going to be a fun one because I think Stephen King has a lot to say about evil, actually. And I look forward to seeing what you all come up with. So that's it for us. Once again, next week we are reading Chapter 10. We are finishing Part 3, Come Reap, with Chapter 10, Under the Demon Moon 2. It is the conclusion of Roland's story. And oh boy, Matt. Oh boy.
Oh boy.
We know what's going to happen. And yet.
And yet, I feel you're making me nervous there, Scott.
Good.
Yeah. So remember, you can reach out to us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com. It's cool. Apparently, a lot of you have been doing that. So thank you. Also on Twitter at kingslingerspod. And you can always head on over to reddit.com/r/doofmedia and participate in the discussion threads there associated with each of these episodes, and see what else we're doing over there too.
Yeah. And if you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found, including a new service that I just learned about called TuneIn, which is apparently how people with Teslas can listen to podcasts, because we got an email from someone that said, hey, you're not on TuneIn. And I was like, what's that? And then I looked it up and found how to submit it. So by the time you are listening to this, we should also be on TuneIn. And so you can listen to us there as well. We're everywhere.
So all you Tesla drivers out there, we're going to corner the Tesla podcast listening market.
There it is. There it is.
All right. Great. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. Scott, we are only 19 patrons away from our next Patreon tier. And
Hey,
that is
Matt,
a tier.
Matt, how many patrons away?
19.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes. Away from our next tier. And that tier is the tier where we start production on something I've been looking forward to for a long time. It is a piece of original fiction content by yours truly. I've written basically a radio drama, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're going to be producing it. And I think people will like it. It's called Explorators.
Yeah, and we've put a tiny little teaser thing up on our Doof Media Twitter. So if you're at all curious about this thing, you can see just a couple lines of teaser to whet your appetite at our Twitter. That's at Doof Media on Twitter. I'm excited about this. This is a whole new venture for us. We've only produced this kind of audio podcast, two people talking to each other format. We've never done an original story. We've never done something like this. So it is new ground for us. And we are a mere 19 people away from making it happen, which is, it's crazy. I never thought we'd get here. True story. When we first set up our Patreon, when we were a little baby podcast that two people were listening to, and those people were us, we said, all right, what are our pie in the sky goals? And this was like let's throw it up there as a thing that's going to take years to get to. And it did. It did. Uh-huh. But we're almost here. So if this sounds like something you would love to listen to, now is the time. You can donate at any level, any dollar amount, even if it's only $1 a month, and you will count towards those 19 patrons we have left, and you can help make this thing happen. We think it's going to be great. We're very excited about it, and we hope you folks are too.
Yeah. So thank you so much. And speaking of thank you, special thanks to these new patrons that brought us that much closer to that goal. We have Bidoofs, Jaron J, Lindy, Forrest Y, Indiana C, Nuchek V, and we have Doof Dancers Jody H, and we have Doof Warrior Zeke Aaron. Thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate it. I apologize if I mispronounced your name, and we hope to see you on the Doof Media Discord, where we hang out and talk about movies and books and how to read things.
Yeah, and how Matt should be watching Buffy.
And how Matt should be watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
And of course, if you cannot afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. The world is crazy right now. It's a scary place out there, and not everyone has the money to spare, and that's fine. Because there are tons of ways to help us out still. You can share the podcast. If you share the podcast with someone who is financially able to donate, that's basically like you donating, right? Right?
Yes. I mean, non-jokingly, it's very helpful, actually.
If you share the podcast with 3 people and they share the podcast with 3 people, I don't think they have a term for that thing, but it seems rather effective.
Yeah. No, there's no term. There's no term. Don't worry.
Of course, you can always help us out by leaving us a rating and a review on whatever platform you listen to the show on, if they have a rating and review service. This week's Spotlight review comes from Stephen S., who gives us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and says, perfect timing. I just recently binged the Dark Tower series over the last month, and when it was over, I felt as though a piece of my life was missing. On a random search through podcasts, I came across Kingslingers and have been hooked since. With the story so fresh in my mind, I'm getting both the I can't wait until this part feeling, as well as the I didn't even remember this happening feeling as well. Thanks, guys, and I really hope this series blows up big like it truly deserves. Oh man, Stephen, that is very kind of you. We do appreciate that. We hope so too. That's because the 3 and then 3 thing, right? It's like a triangle. It's something.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate that. It's cool to hear that a search function actually led to us. I've never heard of that before. So
I know that's just the way you dream it to be.
Yeah.
But it never happens that way.
Yeah. You're a unicorn.
Stephen the Unicorn. All right, folks, we'll see you back here next week as Roland's story concludes once again under the demon moon. Long days. and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.